The tension built to a crescendo as the plane entered a death spiral, centrifugal forces pinning the remaining crew in place. By 11:15 hours, the altimeter spun downward, the ground rushing up to meet them. What happened next would become legendary, a tale whispered in mess halls and barracks across the Allied air forces. The crisis peaked in those harrowing seconds as snap, crackle, pop disintegrated around its crew. Flames engulfed the wings, the structural integrity failing catastrophically. Magee, overcome by hypoxia and injuries, lost consciousness near the waist door. Whether he jumped deliberately or was flung out by an explosion remains a point of historical debate, but the result was the same. He tumbled into the abyss without a parachute, free-falling from 22,000 feet toward the enemy-held terrain below. The situation seemed utterly impossible. At that altitude, terminal velocity for a human body is around 120 miles per hour, a speed that would pulverize anyone upon impact. The winter landscape of Saint-Nazaire rushed upward, frozen fields, concrete bunkers, and the sprawling railroad station with its glass-roofed atrium. The remaining crew fought desperately. Captain Fredericks and Lieutenant Morse wrestled the controls, trying to level the plane for a crash landing, but the fire consumed the hydraulics, rendering the flaps and rudder useless. The bombardier, Lieutenant Wintersetter, clung to his Norden bomb sight, releasing the remaining payload in a final act of defiance, but the bombs scattered wide of the target. Inside the fuselage, the heat became unbearable, blistering paint and melting wiring. Technical Sergeant Hart, manning the top turret, was trapped as flames licked at his position. The radio operator, Union, already wounded, slumped over his set, unable to send a distress call. The tail gunner, Durant, fired until his guns jammed, his last bursts taking down and pursuing F-190 before a cannon shell tore through his compartment. The waist gunner, Milam, was hit multiple times, his body crumpling to the floor. As the B-17 spiraled past 15,000 feet, the centrifugal force intensified, making movement nearly impossible. The aircraft's aluminum frame creaked and popped, rivets shearing under the strain. Smoke billowed thick and black, choking the survivors. For Magee, already in freefall, the world blurred into a vortex of sky and earth. Unconscious, he spun end over end, the rush of air whipping his flight suit, the cold biting into his exposed skin. Below, the glass roof of the Gare de Saint-Nazaire loomed, a vast expanse of fragile panes supported by steel girders, designed for peacetime commuters, not for cushioning an airman. Everything seemed lost. The 303rd Bomb Group watched in horror from their positions as snap, crackle, pop trailed smoke and fire, breaking formation and plunging earthward. Ground observers in Saint-Nazaire, German soldiers and French civilians alike, shielded their eyes against the winter sun, tracking the doomed bomber. The human cost mounted. 7 men doomed to perish in the crash, their families back home awaiting telegrams that would shatter lives. Magee's fall epitomized the sheer hopelessness. The odds of survival from such a height without a parachute were infinitesimal, a 1 in a billion miracle against the merciless physics of gravity. The deafening roar of the descending plane filled the air, mingled with the distant thunder of exploding bombs from other B-17s. For 3 brutal hours the raid had raged, but for this crew, time compressed into agonizing minutes. The crisis enveloped them in a shroud of despair, the weight of command decisions heavy on Fredericks' shoulders as he uttered his final words over the intercom. "Godspeed, boys." The impossible situation crystallized. Death by fire, crash, or fall, choices no man should face. In that moment of utter desperation, fate intervened with an unexpected solution that bordered on the miraculous. As Magee hurtled downward, unconscious and limp, his body positioned in a way that maximized air resistance, perhaps spread-eagled, slowing his descent ever so slightly. The turning point came as he approached the railroad station at terminal velocity. Instead of slamming into solid ground, his trajectory gallery aligned perfectly with the station's expansive glass roof, a structure spanning hundreds of feet and arched to diffuse light into the platforms below. The impact was cataclysmic, yet life-saving. Magee's body crashed through the glass panes, shattering them into a rain of shards that absorbed much of the kinetic energy. The roof's slope and the give of the supporting girders further decelerated his fall. Acting like a makeshift net, he plummeted through layer after layer, glass, then steel beams softened by the shattering panes, before landing on the concrete floor in a mid-cascade of debris. The explosion of glass muffled the thud, and miraculously, the structure's design distributed the force, preventing instant death. What overcame the odds was physics and fortune. The glass roof's fragility broke his fall in stages, reducing the G-forces from lethal to survivable. Theories abound. Some suggest a nearby bomb explosion created an updraft or shockwave that cushioned him, though later investigations, including by the Mythbusters team, debunked this. Others point to his unconscious state, which kept his body relaxed, minimizing internal injuries from tense muscles. Against impossible odds, sheer determination, or perhaps divine intervention, as Magee later reflected, played a role. In his prayers during the fall, he had surrendered to a higher power, and that faith, coupled with the improbable alignment of events, turned the tide. German soldiers stationed at the depot rushed to the scene, expecting to find a mangled corpse. Instead, they discovered Magee alive, though gravely wounded. "Americana," they shouted, pulling him from the rubble. This heroic twist, not a deliberate decision, but an extraordinary convergence of circumstances, transformed certain death to survival, a testament to the unpredictability of war and the resilience of the human spirit. The outcome of that fateful day was a mix of tragedy and triumph. Snap, Crackle, Pop crashed into the forest near La Baule-Escoublac, about 10 miles west of Saint-Nazaire, claiming the lives of 7 crew members: Captain Jacob W. Fredericks, Lieutenant A.L. Morse, Jr., Lieutenant G. Wintersetter, Technical Sergeant Dennis Carlisle Hart, Technical Sergeant A.M. Union, Sergeant M.L. Milam, and Staff Sergeant E.W. Durant. Their bodies were recovered and initially buried locally before being repatriated or interred at the American Cemetery in St. James, Normandy. Lieutenant Glenn M. Harrington parachuted safely but lost his leg to enemy fire. He was captured, repatriated as one of the first wounded AAF prisoners, and lived until 1987. Staff Sergeant J.L. Gordon also bailed out successfully, spending the war as a POW. For Magee, survival came at a heavy price. He sustained 28 wounds from glass and shrapnel, a broken right leg and ankle, a nearly severed right arm, a broken nose and eye socket, kidney damage, and severe shock. Treated initially at the Hermitage Hotel in Saint-Nazaire, which served as a German hospital, a skilled enemy doctor saved his arm despite the language barrier and wartime animosity. Magee became a prisoner of war, interned at Stalag Lucht I in Barth, Germany, and later Stalag 17B in Austria, enduring the hardships of captivity until liberated by Allied forces in May 1945. The historical significance of Magee's story extends beyond personal survival. It highlighted the perils faced by the 8th Air Force crews, who suffered over 26,000 killed in action during the war, a casualty rate higher than the U.S. Marine Corps. The raid on Saint-Nazaire, though costly, with 4 B-17s lost from the 303rd alone, contributed to weakening the U-boat threat, paving the way for D-Day. Magee's story became a symbol of hope amid horror, inspiring morale-boosting stories in wartime propaganda. In recognition of his ordeal, Magee was awarded the Purple Heart for his wounds, the Air Medal for meritorious achievement in aerial flight, the Prisoner of War Medal, and other commendations. Post-war, he returned to civilian life, working in the airline industry until retirement in 1979. In 1995, he revisited Saint-Nazaire, dedicating a memorial to his fallen crewmates and planting a tree of peace. Honored as a citizen of honor by the city, Magee's story underscores the human cost of war, the weight of command decisions, the bonds of camaraderie, and the triumph of the spirit over adversity.
He passed away on December 20th, 2003, at age 40, his legacy enduring as one of World War II's most astonishing survival accounts. The casualties that day reminded all of the grim arithmetic of aerial warfare. For every miracle like Magee's, countless untold sacrifices paved the path to victory. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to WWII Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.